of our Commonwealth, and I'm proud to introduce one of my newest colleagues who shares now Jefferson County's representation, Thomas Massie from the 4th Congressional District.
Thank you, Congressman Yarmouth, and thank you, Chairman Hornback. I am such a junior congressman in the U.S. House of Representatives that when I sit on the committee, the questions are asked in order of seniority. I have yet to get to ask a question yet from your side. So the only way I get to speak is if I'm here to testify. I want to speak on as a legislator, as a farmer, and as an entrepreneur. And I'll start out with the legislative perspective in Congress. I introduced a bill, and I should remind Rand that he needs to get on the ball in the Senate. They're a week behind. But Congressman Yarmouth and I introduced a bill last week that has 28 co-sponsors. And the last time this bill was introduced, it had 22 original co-sponsors. So there is momentum in the Congress for this bill. It's a bipartisan bill. 20 of the co-sponsors are Democrats, and 8 of them are Republicans. It's H.R. 525. It's 2 pages long, and it's very simple. I would offer that it does not cut any funding for the state police or for any of the eradication efforts. Doesn't even mention the funding. What is this, like the Super Bowl? The lights are
That would
it's
make
about to
like
get a lot better.
So I don't know if that works.
All right. All the bill would do is define industrial hemp as having a content of less than 0.3%, and it would take it from the list of controlled substances on the Controlled Substances Act. It's already been referred to the Judiciary and Energy and Commerce. Now I'd like to talk about the farmer's perspective. I own a tobacco farm that my wife grew up on. It was handed down to us from her parents, who also still live there. It's primarily a cow-calf operation now because there's no suitable replacement for tobacco in eastern Kentucky. You know, if I've been to one tobacco diversification program seminar, I've been to a dozen. I've studied blueberries, aquaculture, honeybees, switchgrass. We're still looking for a replacement for tobacco in eastern Kentucky. And ironically, as legislators, you have to contribute money for that diversification program. And we're not looking for money here today. We want to pass this bill just to get out of the way of farmers who have already identified a crop. You know, my first exposure to hemp was not in college. My first exposure to hemp was on the farm. When we came back 10 years ago, we had a lot of fixing up to do. We had to fix the roof of the barns, and I thought I should have some safety equipment. So I got a harness, and I got a lanyard, and this thing called a rope grab that goes on the rope. And then I asked an old iron worker. He said, go get you 100 feet of rope. Don't get that nylon junk. Get you some hemp rope, because the rope grab will work a lot better on the hemp rope. And I went to the store. I thought they'd look at me with 3 eyes, as if I had 3 eyes. But they actually had hemp rope, and it was made in China. And that's the rope that we use on our farm. And it kind of made me upset. Why are we using rope from China? And Congressman Yarmouth mentioned baling twine. Now, on the farm, when we're putting up hay on our farm, and my kids help with this too, the only reason we have to go to town and spend money is to buy diesel and to buy baling twine. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we could buy baling twine made in Kentucky? I looked at the history of the sisal baling twine that comes from Brazil. It came into usage in the 30s, just as hemp was being outlawed here, and it took over in 48, just as we quit producing hemp in the United States. Finally, I'd like to talk from an entrepreneurial perspective. It's the dream of my wife and I to pass our family farm on to our children, and for them not to have to subdivide it or cut all the timber. But in order to do that, there has to be a viable economic alternative. A couple economic terms here. One basic tenet of microeconomics. In a market where there's no barrier to entry, in the long term profits are zero. And barriers to entry can be a capital-intensive program, patents, or legislative barriers. We're asking you to reduce the legislative barriers. And finally, the other final economic term I want to mention here is first mover advantage. Okay, you've all heard of eBay. Nobody's heard of the second online bidding site. You've all heard of Facebook. You've all heard of Google. What if somebody sat back and said, well, let's see how the search engine business goes for Google before we get into this business? I mean, there would be no second place finisher in these games. And I submit to you that we're competing with other states. And that's why I came back from Washington Day to be here today, because I care about Kentucky. Our climate is perfect for this, and we're going to be competing with Ohio, Indiana, and Tennessee, because their climate is just as well suited as ours is. So I implore you to pass Senate Bill 50, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Webb, I think you had a question.
I have a comment. I'd like to welcome, I'm his senator. He was my congressman, but redistricting took him from me, but I'm still his senator, and I'm still his good friend, Thomas Massie. Thanks for coming, and thanks for all of you taking time out of your schedules. I know Senator Paul and I talked about this issue in Washington a few weeks ago, and Thomas and I got a tour by Congressman Guthrie, and that was fun. But I just really appreciate you, Thomas, and appreciate your friendship. I've been to his farm. He's sincere, and those lovely children I want to keep as my constituents. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Webb. And Senator Webb's also from a tobacco region that's been hard hit by the transition. Carter County, Lewis County, Mason County, we're all looking for that replacement crop. And the question I want to ask is, and I know I don't get to ask questions, but would we rather see the warehouses for the hemp in Aberdeen, Ohio, or would we rather see them in Maysville, Kentucky? And I'd rather see them in Maysville, Kentucky.
Thank you. Senator Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all so much for being here. We appreciate it a great deal. I believe that the father of our country grew industrial hemp.